So Mech Arena released an official interview with the developers where they addressed 5 different important questions about the game. And in this video, I'm going to go over what they talked about and what it means for the future of Mech Arena. I linked the original video in the description, but let's jump into the first question they asked, which is, how are new mechs and weapons designed, and what is the process when making new items? So basically they said they come up with the concept of what they want to make, and it's often based on 2 factors, being things that previous items that players enjoyed and also performed well in game. So in general, they want to make things that players enjoyed. They kind of want to rehash things players liked and things that performed well. They also said they play test their new items a lot, which I think they sometimes miss on this for certain mechs or weapons. Let's take like the most recent mech, for example, Volti. Volti's ability, the concept for the ability is cool, but actually in game it is not strong enough, and there's not really any reason to run it. It's one of the worst legendary mechs ever made. It's not really good enough and not worth it to invest into. They also said they make changes based on their playtesting, like to either the stats, the functions, or the visuals, right? The animations, or just the actual visual of the mech, which of course is the case. And finally, they said they want to make sure that each item has something unique that's kind of like a wow, kind of an alluring factor for players, right? They want players to be interested in the new item, and this is something that I've highlighted multiple times in my test server like reviews for new items, because it's super important for every new item to bring something unique that's interesting, and it also needs to be a viable option in the game, right? It needs to be strong. And like for something like the most recent weapon, Berserker, it doesn't really bring anything unique. It's just another weapon that has a lot of, it's just another assault or heavy duty type weapon that just shoots a lot of bullets. It just shoots bullets, right? There's not much unique to it. The perk was that the double damage chance ramps up, but that's just more damage over time, and it's nearly identical in function to like Overdriver. I mean, they're a little different, but it didn't bring anything unique, and it's not good enough for me to be interested in using it over other items like Minigun or Overdriver, which are both perform better. So why would I ever use Berserker if it doesn't bring anything new to the table and is also worse in stats? On to the second question, which was, will average or worst performing weapons or mechs be buffed or balanced? So basically, are worse weapons going to be buffed so that they can be more comparable to the current meta weapons like Revoker and Sturmak, which are really dominant compared to a lot of weapons? So they have a couple different options they discussed. They could buff old stuff that's bad. They could nerf newer stuff that's good, and this is general old or new. At this point, it's just buff the worst items and nerf the meta items. But what they'd rather to do, and this is what they said, they'd rather add new items that will counter the meta or change the meta, which is how the game has been going. And I'm actually a fan of the buffing the old worse items. So something like Dreadshot, anything, that's just an example. Anything that's bad, I think it would be great to buff worse items so that they're more comparable and more competitive in the game. But they said what they want to do is to continue adding new things that will slowly be power crept. Power creep is basically just where newer and newer items are added that are stronger and stronger. And power creep in the game has definitely tapered off at this point. It's not growing much. I mean, occasionally there's a new item that's like pretty good, but right now, I mean, we've had Surge and Eclipse and Nomad and all these things that have been the meta for a long time. I mean, literally Surge has been the meta for like over 2 years at this point, I think. Same with Eclipse. They're both about for over 2 years they've been the meta. Obviously, we had the Revokers and Sturmaks added a little more recently. Deathwalker is the most recent big meta addition, but the problem that they did address in the video, they talked about how the problem with that is it takes about a year for things to get into the gear hub, maybe even more, a year and a half, right? So if a new meta item like Deathwalker is added, that was added like a year ago, and we still don't have Deathwalker in the gear hub. So for free-to-play players or people who don't want to pay a ton, it's really hard to keep up with the meta. And of course, that's not healthy for the player base. Like, free-to-play players are never going to be truly meta, right? But at the end of the day, it is the way their monetization works. So I understand it from their perspective that they'd rather do that than buffing old things to be more competitive. But there are some things that are just so bad. Like Redox, I think, was the first legendary mech, and it's just terrible. Its ability is like incomparable. It doesn't feel like a legendary mech, right? Something like that, a Redox could get even a fairly big buff, and it would still be bad. It would not be even comparable to newer, stronger mechs like Deathwalker or meta mechs like Surge and Eclipse. So I think that some buffs to weaker items would be great, especially if we're considering legendary items, which are supposed to be all on the same strength level, right? All legendary items should be about comparable and fit in their niche and their category in the game. Snipers should be legendary snipers. You know, right? Assault weapons should be legendary assault weapons, but like, or for redox, right? It should be a legendary attacker, but compared to another legendary attacker, it's just terrible. On to question number 3, which is, will lower rarity items be added to the game? So this is specifically like, will common, uncommon, rare, maybe epic mechs or weapons be added, right? So the answer to this is that they are only focusing on adding legendary items right now. And of course, the main reason for that is that those are like the high price items, right? That's what makes Plarium the most money. They cost more in real life money, and they cost more A coins or credits, right, in the gear hub. And because, you know, we had the addition of the gear hub, which emphasized what they were talking about in the video, is that they want to have a linear progression. You go from rarity up all the rarities until you get to legendary, and then legendary is the final stage of the game. It's the real stage after you work your way up from common, uncommon, rare, epic, and then finally you get a full legendary hanger, which again, in theory, legendary items are the strongest, which they are. The meta is all legendary items basically, but a lot of legendary items are not, they don't feel legendary, like I was talking about earlier. So I mean, this is the way they've designed their progression in the game. Of course, I think it would be fun to add some more lower rarity items. People really enjoy playing with these lower rarity stuff, even if they're worse, because now you can upgrade them easier and things like that. I do think it would be good to help emphasize this progression to lower the pricing of epic items a little bit for the upgrades, because the upgrades are the same. Upgrades and rank ups are the same as legendary right now. Obviously, the price from the gear hub is still lower, but that could be lower too. It's like 4,000 A coins for a mech like Cheetah, who does not perform well at all. So I definitely think that should be, I feel like that'll be a thing that's implemented, and possibly even the reduction of legendary item prices. But if we're going with the linear progression through different rarities, I think that the price of at least epic items should also be reduced. The fourth question they discussed was if any new pilots will be added to the game, and they basically said that no, they aren't going to add any new legendary pilots because there are already enough for each weapon type, which I agree with that. We don't need any more legendary pilots really. There was like a period of like 2 years where we're getting a lot of legendary pilots, until now where we have like at least like 2 for most like weapon categories. So we don't really need any more legendary pilots. But the question really that I would be interested in is the limited pilots, which they also mentioned that, and they basically said they're not really looking to add any collaboration limited pilots right now. They did just add the 2 Neymars like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and those ones are really interesting. You get less stat buff, right? In general, they're not better than legendary, but you get a less of a stat buff, but you get a bonus ability, which I think would be really cool. I would wish they would add a lot more of these limited pilots. I don't know if they'd need to be limited, but that's just the rarity it was. I assume if they were ever to, they'd need a really big collaboration, like Neymar, obviously big celebrity, and it was I'm sure it was very beneficial for the game, brought lots of players, but they're just not really planning to evolve the pilot feature anymore. It's about at the state where they want it to be developed to, and it's not really gonna be changed for the foreseeable future, at least. The fifth and final question they addressed in the video is, why are bots so strong, and will they stay that way? So that was the question that was asked, is why are bots so strong? So I think they didn't really specify, but I think what they're saying is, why are bots' gear so strong compared to a player? If I play at 5k SP, I might be fighting bots whose SP, if they had a hanger, would be 6 to 7k. They have stronger mods, maxed pilots, maxed implants, right? They have stronger gear than you. And basically what they said is the AI was only developed at the launch of the game, back when things were a lot more simple, and now they've added more complex and more skill-based like weapons and mechs with like Gemini, all these lock-on things, I don't know, pod guns, Volti, I mean the jumping mechs. The bots can't use like Redeemer, they just don't understand it, so they just don't use the ability. Same with Lacewing, Lancer, I think, and Tengu. They don't use any of those mechs abilities because they just don't understand the function of them. The AI just doesn't understand. So they said basically that's the reason. I think this is my interpretation of it. I didn't catch it, or they didn't specify, but I think they're saying the reason bots have stronger gear than you is because their AI is not advanced. And I think we all know bots in Mech Arena are pretty dumb, so I think they're compensating for, you know, their skill in the game, skilled gameplay, I guess, right? Bots just aren't very good at the game. They compensate for that with a lot stronger gear. And they also mentioned that someday in the future we might get an update to the AI, which I assume would mean that their gear would then be lowered down and they'd feel more like fighting real players at your correct SP. So overall, I do appreciate Plarium for doing an interview like this. They only addressed 5 questions, but I think they're all pretty solid questions. Yeah, let me know what you guys thought of all these questions. Put your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Thank you so much for watching the video all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.